Knowledgeable.
Listen, here's what's wrong with your hypothesis, your theorem, your supposition, your postulate.
Honest.
If that front ain't in gangsta, your back end won't be able to show its full potential.
Understanding.
You're going to suck. You're going to suck for the next couple of years.
Passionate.
I'm all over social media. I live it.
This is the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Hashtag facts.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Now, here's Kevin.
Spurs got numbers hungry now behind the play. 5-on-4. Wemby's going to pull a deep three. Oh my goodness. A logo shot. 28-footer. Ties it at 108. Timeout, Thunder.
Mike Tirico, Reggie Miller on the call last night for NBC. That three from Victor Wembanyama came in transition from 28 feet out, as Mike Tirico called it. It tied the game, as he mentioned, at 108 with just over 26 seconds left in the first overtime. It was one of a half dozen or so wow moments from Wemby. But when a 7'5" center catches a pass in transition, stops on a dime, and shoots a 28-foot three-pointer and makes it, it becomes the loudest of all the wow moments of the night. Good morning, everybody. You know, we're all creatures of recency, biased by whatever we just saw, whatever happened the day before or whatever happened last night. Well, last night was, you know, at the very least, a memorable game and a memorable individual performance for an NBA player in an NBA playoff game. At best, it's one of the greatest individual performances in NBA playoff history. Of course, Game 1 memories are never the same as Game 7 memories, or even later in a series, a Game 5 at 2-2, or a Game 6 to, you know, stay alive. Call it whatever you want last night, but it was special. And it was so unique because we've never seen anybody like him. 41 points, 24 rebounds, 3 block shots, every big defensive play, every big offensive shot. All of his teammates, all young just like him, looking to him, looking to a 7'5" player on any portion of the floor. Out front with the dribble, in transition, on the post, at the elbow, doesn't matter. Defensively, what a block in double overtime. He had one of the best overtime periods in the second overtime you'll ever see. He was 14 of 25 from the floor. He was 1 for 2 from behind the arc. He usually shoots more threes. He was 12 of 13 from the free throw line. His 24 rebounds included 9 offensive rebounds. He had 3 block shots, but probably altered another 8 to 9 shots at the rim. He had a steal and 3 assists as well. The basketball game itself was spectacular. 2 unbelievable basketball teams, 2 great defensive basketball teams. Nothing was easy last night. The MVP, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, SGA, did not have a great night necessarily. He played 51 of the available 58 minutes in the double overtime classic, which, by the way, I haven't even mentioned yet. San Antonio won 122 to 115. SGA had a rough night shooting the basketball. 7 of 23 from the floor, 2 of 7 from behind the arc. He ended up with 24 points. He also had 12 assists and 5 steals in the game, and was certainly a factor, as was Jalen Williams, who was back after missing the first 2 rounds of the postseason. He went for 26 on 11 of 25, but I think took a very ill-advised shot at the end of the first overtime, which hurt, which also led to that 28-footer by Wembanyama. On the other end, Wembanyama got help. He does get help. Dylan Harper at 20 years old, the number 2 pick in last year's draft, 24 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, and 7 steals. Stefan Castle, who is an absolute beast, had 17 points, 11 assists, and 6 rebounds. But really, the problem for San Antonio, and this is going to be a problem for Oklahoma City, given that they could not win a basketball game when De'Aaron Fox was injured and ruled out before the tip, San Antonio's point guard, forcing Castle to do much of the ball handling, and it was a disaster at times. He had 11 turnovers. One player, 11 turnovers. He also had 11 assists and 17 points and played 49 minutes and was pretty damn good defensively. What a game. What an absolute classic last night. Man, these playoffs needed that game, needed this series, and needed that performance. I don't know, man. I don't like doing the thing where you come in here and you say it's the greatest of all time. He's only the 4th player in NBA history to go for 40 and 20 in a playoff game. It just was so much different. I never saw Wilt Chamberlain play. I can't speak to Wilt. From what I've heard, it was alien-esque. You know, he was 7'2" when no one else was close to that. He had unbelievable athleticism, hands, feet, skill. It wasn't just power. It wasn't just size. And that's what you see with Wembanyama. I would imagine that people old enough that watched it would say, maybe that's the first time we've seen anything look like Wilt. Wilt, of course, was the all-time outlier in any team pro sport in terms of numbers. He averaged 50 and 25 in a season. This from Don on Twitter. I've never seen Wilt play, but I'm watching Wemby play, and I'll be telling kids 20 years from now how this dude came in and totally dominated his peers. From Michael wrote, recently on your show, you were talking about Jokic's all-time ranking among centers, and I said nobody's passing Kareem, who I think is an all-time top 3 player. Well, I think Wemby is now on track to pass Kareem if he stays healthy. Yeah, you don't have to be a basketball fan, and this is what I've been saying about him for weeks now. You don't have to be a hardcore basketball fan to really be wowed by what you're watching. It looks completely different than anything we've seen because he is indeed 7'5". And at 7'5", he's not a plodding or a cloddish 7'5". He's highly skilled and highly competitive. Earlier in the day, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was named MVP for the 2nd consecutive year. Everybody figured Wembanyama would finish a close second. He actually finished 3rd in the voting behind Jokic, and he said it was motivating. You know, when you are a potential, and maybe we're watching the beginning of one of the greatest to ever do it, almost all of the greatest to ever do it always looked for something to drive them. And he talked about after the game last night, yeah, it was on my mind, finishing 3rd in the MVP voting, finishing behind SGA. They handed him the MVP before the game began. It's hard to say after one game it's over, and I don't think that. I picked Oklahoma City before the series began, and I thought a crucial moment in the game came in the first overtime because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had an issue in the game last night. He was really all over the place, couldn't make shots, didn't hurt him from taking over the game a couple of times at the end of regulation in the first overtime, in the second overtime trying to, but he was sloppy with the basketball at times, missed 16 shots from the field. He was 7 of 23. But there was a moment at 106-105 where he made a move and took it to the rim and flushed it as if to say, we're not losing this game. They went up 3 in that moment with about a minute left, and then they got the ball back. And that's the possession that I think really hurt Oklahoma City. They got the ball back and had the ball up 3 with a minute to go, less than a minute to go. And Jalen Williams, with still 12 seconds left on the shot clock and 33 in the game, fired up a guarded, contested jump shot from about 14, 15 feet and missed badly. That needed to be a better thought-out possession. That was his first game back. He was fine. He missed a couple of threes, then made one actually in the second overtime, a big one. But that was the possession that I thought Oklahoma City could have won the game. They're up 3 with the ball. We're down to 30-something seconds to go, and there's still 12 on the shot clock. I would have gone back to SGA and had him made a play, even off the double team. And that was a bad shot, not in the offense. The ball was missed badly, and it was rebounded and chucked ahead to Castle, who threw it back to Wembanyama, who caught it, stopped on a dime from 28 feet, and knocked down a 3. Literally, there are times, aren't there, when you're watching something and you do scream, or you're like, you got to be kidding me. Oh, my God. Whatever it is you do in those shocking moments, that was last night when he pulled up from 28 feet in transition. The interesting thing about it, it was the smart play because they were in a 2-for-1 situation down 3. Now, from 28 feet, even though he is a good three-point shooter, you're still talking about probably a 23% probability from that far out. And so it's maybe not the best 2-for-1, down 3. And by the way, 2-for-1 down 3 usually means we're going to drive it to the rim and get a quick 2. And then we get the stop. We get the ball back down 1 with a chance to win. It was an out loud scream moment. He's something else, man. He is really something else. I don't know how this series is going to go, but every single game is going to be must watch. I hope that Oklahoma City can come back tomorrow night and win game 2. Because if not, I'm fearful that this thing will be over quickly, as will the NBA Finals, and we will just be looking ahead to a major run of titles, and I'm talking about titles plural, for San Antonio over the next decade. I don't know how many they'll win, but if he stays healthy, they're going to be the favorite to do it pretty much every single season. Tomorrow night is huge, massive. Oklahoma City has to get it. You can't come back against him down 0-2 with the next 2 back in San Antonio. It was such a great game, and I was rooting so hard for Oklahoma City. I picked them. I didn't think this team, San Antonio, was ready for this. And Oklahoma City, man, they are deep. They played 10 guys, 9 significant minutes. They come off the bench with guys firing. The performance by Alex Caruso last night was incredible. The dude had 31 points in 32 minutes off the bench. He was 8 for 14 from behind the arc. Cason Wallace kept knocking down big shots, including a couple of big threes off the bench. They have 9. They just keep coming in waves. The guy that needs to play better, and I don't know how he does it, is Chet Holmgren. He and Wemby have like a personal rivalry, and he did not play well last night. Really interesting. I mentioned to Brian Keefe last week when we had him on the show, the head coach of the Wizards. I mentioned about Wemby and, what would you do against Wemby? And I threw out, what about a smaller guy? Because it's hard if he catches the ball out front. It's harder for a big, tall guy to put the ball on the floor and try to advance it against a smaller guy. And Minnesota actually did it with Ayo Dosunmu briefly in like game 4 or game 5 after Wemby had gotten ejected from game 4 and came back in game 5. By the way, he had a moment last night where he just barreled over Who was it? Was it Caruso that he barreled over? And could have been called for a flagrant one. It appeared to be flagrant. They let it go. I'm glad. I prefer them to not use these flagrants unless somebody truly, throws a punch or an elbow and it's clearly intentional. But they guarded him last night with Alex Caruso, 6'4", 6'5". They guarded him with Lou Dort. They guarded him with Jalen Williams. They took smaller guys at times and put him on Wemby. And I thought they did a good job. That's the crazy thing. I actually thought they did a pretty good job, and he still had 41. 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. I do think on days like today, and I love watching games and talking about games, this beats the hell out of, on May 19th, Diggs or Ayuk. In my personal opinion, we had a memorable playoff game in the NBA last night with a performance for the ages. But I don't want to get carried away with it because for me, there are a lot of other performances that are all-time. Number one on the list is Magic in Game 6 in 1980 at the Spectrum in Philadelphia. Kareem's out. Magic moves from point guard to center. And, some of the things that we're saying about Wembanyama were said about Magic Johnson in a different way because he was not 7'5". But the league had never seen a 6'9" point guard before. Point guard. And that was transformational for the time. Now we see guards of all sizes, but Magic was truly unique because he was 6'8.5", 6'9", and played point guard and was a true point guard. But in Game 6 against the Sixers, up 3-2, and Kareem back in L.A., Magic moved to center and scored 42 points and dished out double-digit assists and rebounds in one of the truly all-time great postseason performances. In my lifetime, that's number one. I don't know because it was a Game 1 that will think back to Wembanyama's Game 1 in Oklahoma City, his first playoff year. But, and maybe in part because there are more of these to come, but 41-24 in a Game 1 in your first playoff series in 49 minutes in a double overtime win on the road in that environment is certainly memorable. Put into words Wemby's performance at 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. The second question is, can Oklahoma City come back and win this series? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Castle. Lobbing. Wembanyama! He's unbelievable, folks. He's unbelievable.
Mike Tirico last night on the call. I like these games on NBC. I like Tirico's call, but I like Breen and Legler a lot too on ESPN ABC. Not a big fan of watching these games on Amazon. I don't know. Does anybody else have the issue with Amazon? I've tried to brighten up the picture. It's just dark. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's me. What a performance last night. Certainly one of the truly great performances in NBA playoff history. It was a great basketball game as well. The game went to double overtime. There was a 10-point deficit overcome by Oklahoma City in the fourth quarter to force overtime. And then they had a really good chance at the end of the first overtime, up 3 with the ball with 33 seconds left. But they missed a quick shot, and then Wembanyama came down in transition, caught a ball literally in transition, and stopped and buried a 28-foot three-pointer. In the game for Wemby, he became the first player since Wilt in 1960 to score 40 points or more and have 20 rebounds or more in his conference finals debut. He's the second Spurs player ever to produce a 40-plus and a 20-plus line in the postseason. David Robinson did it in 1996. His 41 points, 24 rebounds. He becomes the youngest player in NBA history to log a 40-point or more and a 20-rebound or more performance in a playoff game at just 22 years of age, with 134 days added to that to give you the official age that makes him the youngest to ever do it. It was and has been, really, to watch him throughout this postseason. It's something that's hard to actually describe unless you watch it, because it is something we haven't seen before. And I say that, and I'm not old enough to remember Wilt. I know what my father, and he loves Wilt. Wilt's one of his all-time favorite players, and whenever the conversation comes up, he just says, Wilt, Wilt. Wilt's the greatest at everything. And certainly the statistical outlier that Wilt was, certainly says something about how unique he was. And it's 7'2" back then, even though Lou Alcindor, eventually Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, came into the league at 7 foot plus. Wilt's athleticism and skill for somebody that size had not been seen before. Now you just add 3 inches to that, and at 7'5", Wemby's skilled like a guard. I always think about when I'm watching Wemby, and some of you that are old enough, I think about what would Ralph Sampson, what would he have been like had 3-point shooting from guys that size been allowed during his day? Because Ralph really was interesting, because he was 7'4" and could handle and face the basket and play, when every other 7-footer, or even guys that were 6'10" and 6'11", if you were playing the center position, you played on the block with your back to the basket. Now, Ralph didn't play center because Hakeem Olajuwon was the center in that Twin Tower duo. Ralph played power forward and really played more like a small forward. I wonder what Ralph would have been like in today's game, because there are similarities stylistically between Wemby and Ralph Sampson. But Wemby's actually taller, about an inch taller. Ralph was 7'4", and I think just even more skilled. Put it into words, what you watched last night. There are people, and this happens all the time, within 24 hours, shortly after something. It is recency bias, and this is the era of everybody overreacting and saying what we just saw was the greatest thing that we've ever seen. I'm not going to say that. I can't go there. Magic's performance in Game 6 in Philadelphia in 1980, when he played center because Kareem was out, and he went for 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists, is the single greatest performance in postseason history for me, especially given the incredible stakes. He was a rookie And it was game 6 on the road for a championship. And they won the championship without Kareem playing, with a rookie moving from point guard to center. I don't think that's ever happened. But Wemby in a game 1 in a Western Conference Finals, I can't imagine that we're ever going to talk about a game 1 performance like that. And that's the problem, right, with those performances, is game 1s never get the same kind of due that game 7s do. Iverson's game 1 in the NBA Finals in 2001 against the Lakers was incredible for somebody that small. He went for 41 in that game, but they lost the next 4 games. We'll see what happens in this series. 2-part question. 1, describe in your words what you watched with Victor Wembanyama last night. Number 2, is Oklahoma City capable of coming back and winning this series? I am not as sure as I've been. And I was less sure going into this series than I was, say, a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But I'm going to hang in there and say that Oklahoma City can still win the series. 301-230-0980. Man, what a night for Big Tony. Big Tony had his Spurs, his favorite NBA team, and the Montreal Canadiens, his favorite hockey team, winning in dramatic fashion. I know you were excited about both things. Oh, Aaron Rodgers signed too. He's a Steelers fan. I mean, the all-time front runner is on the show. Have we ever seen anything like Wemby?
Nah, Slim. And let me tell you something, Slim. When he pulled up with that 3, I said, come on, man. You talking about yelling. I was like, come on, man. No, he ain't. No, he. Boom. I said, what? But look here, Kevin. I told you a while ago, I told everybody to listen, but nobody wanted to listen. The Spurs are a matchup problem for OKC. They got 5-6 dudes that can bother SGA, all right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem. Castle had 11 turnovers. He had to bring up the ball, so that wasted his energy on offense, so he only had like 17, 19, or whatever he had. You let Fox get in the game and let Fox bring that ball up. First of all those runouts that Oklahoma City – see, Oklahoma City gets on these spurts because they turn you over, they get these dunks, the crowd gets on, and then you're out of the game. Well, when Fox gets in there, and they going to be all that, Castle ain't got to handle the ball, and Castle will take it to the rim and try and dunk it on anybody. It won't matter who it is. That's going to be a problem. And the other problem is Chet. Chet can't do nothing. There's nothing he can do. There's nothing he can do to even think about guarding Wemby. And when they go to that small thing they're going to be doing, they're just going to throw the lob on him, man. I mean, because in the first half, Wemby was staying all out on the perimeter and all that. Second half, they started pick and rolling them, throwing lobs, all kinds of craziness. Dude, OKC, they could come back and win it, but I'm going to tell you right now, Minnesota was the team that gave the Spurs the trouble. Minnesota and Denver. But Spurs figured it out. They say we're too young. But sometimes, hey, when you were young, you would climb up a tree and jump out a 30-story building, right? You won't do it now because you're old. But sometimes when you're young and dumb and you just don't care, hey, the world is your oyster. And Wemby, y'all just living in his ocean, man. You take it easy. Oh, Kim.
What?
They back, boy. Doc Walker's going to have a heart attack because my boys are back and I ain't going to get started. You have a good one, man.
But let me just say this about Chet Holmgren. He's got to make Wemby pay for not coming out and guarding him. He did on that one play when SGA had that bucket in the first overtime because he's standing there in the corner, which he needs to. That's why, before the playoffs started, and I think you and I talked about this, I thought Denver had the best shot at San Antonio because of Jokic. He could pull Wemby away from the bucket consistently, although Jokic didn't shoot the 3 well in the postseason in the series against Minnesota. But yeah, he's
Oh, Cam, let me give you one more thing. For you folks who don't know, Dylan Harper is an absolute. Now his dad was a monster.
Yeah,
I ain't even gonna say it, but Slim, he gonna be better than his daddy. And he comes off the bench, but he had to start last night. But Slim, Cooper Flag, nah, Slim. If Dylan was on another team, he'd get 25 a game, easy.
Do you know that Ron Harper played at Miami of Ohio, and they played Maryland in an NCAA tournament game, and it was bias against Ron Harper. This is Dylan Harper's father, for those that don't know. Ron Harper played 15 years in the NBA, won titles with Mike in Chicago. And he had, I think this is right, he had 37 and bias had 31 in a tournament game that went to overtime. He was such a great college basketball game. How old's Ron Harper now? He's got to be in his 60s,
I don't know,
right?
but his two kids can play.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I know.
No doubt about it. Yep. All right. I'll holler at
baby,
you.
take it easy.
Nick, describe Wemby's performance, and can OKC come back and win this series?
What's going on, Kev?
Hey, Nick.
I'm 21. Wemby is 10 months older than me. This is the best player in the NBA. And he proved it last night. I don't know if you saw this, but when Wemby was on the floor, the Thunder shot 16 of 50, and when he was off the floor, they shot 10 of 16.
Yeah. This has been a season-long thing. What he does to other teams' field goal shooting percentage, because you can't shoot a normal shot from basically 12 feet and in with him anywhere near the paint. It's the most dominating defensive presence that I think I've ever seen in basketball before. Honestly, I can't think of a more dominating presence defensively than Wemby, because it's not just that he's 7'5". His wingspan pushes him to 9'7". You can't shoot over him. You have to, SGA had a move last night where he got into him, and you actually got to get into his chest and move him back a little bit to be able to get a shot over him at the rim. You really do have to attack him physically, while right now he's still, not as strong as he's going to be in 2, 3, 4 years. Either that or you got to make a lot of jump shots, a lot of them, and a lot of threes.
But listen, Kev, I still think OKC has a chance. I mean, that team is just so deep. And that double overtime game in game 1 might wear this Spurs team out heading into game 2. But listen, if Wembanyama leads the Spurs to a title this year, I think we have to, and I love Jokic. I'm with you. I love Jokic. We might have to have some uncomfortable conversations, because this guy's 22. This is the best playoff performance I've seen since Jimmy Butler went absolutely nuts against the Bucks.
The 50, yeah.
Yeah, and this might not even be his best performance of his career. He's 22. We might have to have some real uncomfortable conversations when it comes to the best big men of this century, and maybe down the line all time. I think
it's trending in the direction of not very uncomfortable at all. It's going to be pretty easy. He's one of one in terms of style. There's nobody like him. We've never seen anybody like him. Again, there are people older than I am that might say Wilt was that way, but in terms of by the way, 24 rebounds is not going to be an outlier. He's going to have a playoff game where he has 30 rebounds and 7 or 8 block shots at some point. He may not have the 41 to go along with it, but he's already had a 12-block performance in this postseason. Against was it against Portland or Minnesota? I'm forgetting now.
I think it was Minnesota.
Yeah, although 2 or 3 of them were questionable in potential goaltends. No, it's incredible. It's funny that you bring up that Jimmy Butler performance, because Butler had a couple of those during the bubble run to the finals and during the finals run where they played Denver. I mean, he must have had, I want to go back and see, because he had that night where he went for 56, I think it was, which was just one of the most insane performances by a forward I think we've ever seen. But I think he had 7 or 8 40-point games. What'd you say?
Kevin Harlan nearly died of shock watching that performance on the call.
It was insane. Yeah. All right, thanks.
I got one more thing, Kevin, then I'll let you run.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I can only imagine what Bob Cousy or Jerry West would say if they saw Victor Wembanyama's performance from last night. I can only imagine what they'd say 60 years ago. That's all I got, Kev. Have a good one.
Well, thanks for the call. You're 21, and it's a great perspective. I really want to hear from those of you who saw Wilt play, Because Wilt's the one where it's like, oh, come on, man. He averaged 50 and 25. Averaged 50 and 25. And nobody in the history of team sports has ever been a greater statistical outlier like Wilt's been. And Wembanyama probably won't ever reach those numbers. It's a different game. Now, he's not going to average 50 and 25. I don't see Wembanyama ever averaging 30 in a season. Look, he's a great offensive player and threat offensively from, basically apparently 28 feet and in. But his defensive presence, I don't remember a player who either blocked shots, deflected shots, or altered as many shots in games as he does. You cannot shoot your normal shot from 12 feet and in with him in the paint. Let's go to Anthony in DC. Anthony, go ahead.
Kevin, I was going to rib you for the call segment from yesterday, but you redeemed yourself today. When you can find any word in the dictionary, any adjective, and all of them apply to Wembanyama. He is Ralph Sampson 40 years later. If anybody of age that has seen Ralph Sampson play, you're looking at Ralph Sampson and Wembanyama, excuse me.
Yeah, but Wemby's a true center in the NBA. Ralph was not playing alongside Hakeem. I would have loved to have seen Ralph in an era where bigs could shoot threes because he could shoot it. And you could tell that he, if basketball had been played that way, Ralph would have been one of the first truly tall guys to shoot threes, especially if he had played with the Rockets with Hakeem on the team.
That's what I'm saying. Everything that Wembanyama is doing today, if Ralph was in this era, he would be doing it.
Would he be doing it as well, though? I mean, you might be right. There's a similarity in the look, right, Anthony? Like when you see Wembanyama and you see how tall he is, and the height is such an outlier, and then you see his skill. Ralph had the skill to go along with the height, exactly. And that was what was crazy about Ralph. But apparently Wilt did too. Now, Wilt wasn't putting the ball on the floor because Wilt was a true center, and back then every center played with his back to the basket. But yeah, I do see that, and I know what you're saying. It would have been interesting to see Ralph come along 30 years, 40 years later. Yes.
See, this is one of my pet peeves when people talk about, well, he couldn't play in this era, or so-and-so could play in this era. People look at it in a vacuum. If you took somebody from this era and put them back in the late 80s, early 90s, you have to take into account that they are coming into that situation participating in all of the elements of what's going on back then.
Of course.
The same training.
Yeah, training and food
applies.
And nutrition, the whole thing. Yeah.
Exactly,
of course.
And vice versa, going forward.
Yeah,
so all that applies. So that's always been one of my pet peeves. But as far as can San Antonio come back, yeah, I mean it's way too early to say that. Now they definitely have to win game 2.
They have to win game 2. They absolutely have to win tomorrow night. It is an absolute wrap if they don't win tomorrow night. And I hope they do win tomorrow night because I want to see more of these games. This is the series, people. This is the one. This is the de facto finals. And I'm probably going to look stupid for saying that because watch the Knicks or Cavs end up really testing, San Antonio or OKC in the finals because Indiana did it last year at OKC. But these are the two best teams in the NBA. And what's interesting, and Anthony, you know this, these are like, dynastic quality teams. Like without the other in the conference, we would be at the beginning of dynasties for each of these teams, but they'll battle each other for the next several years. But here's one thing OKC doesn't have. They don't have Wemby. Thank you, Anthony. Appreciate it. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Describe Wemby's performance in your own words. Also, do you think Oklahoma City can come back and win this series? Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Victor Wembanyama had one for the ages last night. There's no doubt about that. 41 points, 24 rebounds. He had 3 block shots. In the second overtime, he had 9 points, 4 rebounds, and a block shot as they pulled away from OKC 122-115 in a thrilling double overtime Game 1 road win. Describe Wemby's performance if you watched it last night in your own words. That's part one. Part two is Oklahoma City done, or do you think they can come back and win this series? I do think they can come back and win this series. I'm not as confident, obviously, as I was 2 weeks ago when I didn't think there was any chance anybody in the field could beat them 4 out of 7. I definitely feel like San Antonio can win the series, especially after last night, but I'll stick with OKC. They're so deep. They are so good defensively. They swarm you defensively. But, man, Wembanyama last night, and without De'Aaron Fox, he didn't even play their point guard last night, and 41-24, 3 blocks, and I don't know how many other shots he altered, but it was double digits for sure. Let's go to Ricardo in D.C. Ricardo, go ahead.
Thanks for taking the call, Kevin.
Sure.
I just have one word to describe Wemby's performance, and that's astonishing. I'm going on 68 years old, and I have to say I have never seen anything like him. I did see Wilt. I can remember seeing Wilt in, what was that, the 1972 championship season
against the
Knicks.
Lakers. Yeah.
Yeah. And Wilt obviously was a physical freak himself. But, back then, and even, of course, when he was with the Lakers, that was at the end of his career. So he wasn't in his prime then. So I can't say I saw a lot of Wilt in his prime, but besides just film, And from what I saw from Wilt, again, he was an athletic freak. But basically, he uses his physical force, finger rolls and dunks. He didn't even have much of a hook shot like Kareem. And so he just outmatched the competition back in those days for sure. But Kareem, by the way, is still my all-time number one. He's the GOAT to me over Jordan, and I'll give you my reasons why. I know this is slightly off the topic. But obviously he won 3 straight NCAA. We got to take his whole career. He won 3 straight championships, and as a freshman, his team, freshmen couldn't play back then.
Yeah, I know.
His team beat the UCLA team that it beat.
I know, but the thing about the UCLA, the thing about the UCLA run, though, Ricardo, is that the tournament was 27 teams, and it was regional. They didn't have to play East Coast teams until they got to the Final Four. They had to win 2 games to get to the Final Four. It was just much different back then. I'm not knocking, Lou Alcindor's, career at UCLA or Walton's career at UCLA. It was just different. So that the team results from the UCLA Wooden years, you've got to put it in context. They didn't have to play anybody until the Final Four. They just didn't.
But adding that on to his NBA career, and they changed rules in college.
I know.
They changed rules. Okay,
I know. By the way, I'm looking up Wilt's series. As how old was he in 72? Let's see how old he was in 72. Wilt was 36 years old in 1972. In the 72 finals against the Knicks, he averaged 23.5 rebounds a game. It's insane. The rebound numbers with him are just crazy when you go back and you consider, and I don't even know if it's because shooting percentages were lower, maybe there were more shots in games. I think the pace was a faster pace, believe it or not, than a lot of the basketball that would come afterwards, which meant more shot attempts, more opportunities for rebounds. But his rebounding numbers are insane. Thanks, Ricardo. Let's go to Ian. Ian, go ahead.
Yama is such a phenomenon. It is so hard to compare him to anyone given the offensive and defensive impact. I do think that this series is hardly over. We talk about game ones being the outliers all through NBA Finals history. Just last week when Minnesota won game one, we were like, oh, this could be interesting. I think,
and Oklahoma City had been sitting for more than a week, so there's that too.
Exactly. And I think that will impact tonight's game. The Knicks have been off for a long time, whereas Cleveland has been kind of in a dogfight for every game. So I think that rust is tangible. But in terms of historical comps, I'm somebody that always believes, I'm the opposite of Tom Lavero. I believe every generation is better than the previous. And while we can compare and contrast, the games are so different, the athletes are so different, the preparation is so different. I think a player like Magic Johnson, as one of the greatest players of his era, it would be so different today. His defense would be exposed. His pace.
We have a lot of players' defense. Different. I mean, Jalen Brunson can't guard anybody. Luka can't guard you. So there's a lot of that. What you're going to say, though, I'm not going to hang up on you because there's one thing that I just want to interject, and that is I totally agree with you. It's crazy to go back and compare. There's physical differences. I mean, Michael Jordan was barely 200 pounds for crying out loud. And you know, LeBron's 275. I mean, there's just a physical difference. It's training, it's nutrition, it's physical evolution, the whole thing. The skill, people like to say the skills are comparable. No, they're not. They're just much higher level skilled players. But I think the divide is different based on position. I think you can actually compare centers from eras to current, past eras to current, much more so than you can guards or forwards. That's why I think when I think of like a Ralph Sampson, I know what he looked like and how he played. He was an outlier. You know, Wilt was a clear physical outlier. Even somebody like Elijah Wan, who just was one of the most unbelievable defensive centers. Like, I think those positions you could take then, put into today's game, and it might look different, but it wouldn't be the difference between Bob Cousy and Steph Curry.
Yeah, so let me respond to 2 points. So the first is my 10-year-old son plays at a AAU level, and we're at a tournament this weekend. And I thought of you because one of your best lines is Paul VI would beat the NBA finals of the 50s. And I totally agree. It's just a different sport, a different pace, a different athleticism, and just a different thing. On your second point about the centers translating more, the reason I will disagree is because the centers of today, whether it's Chet, Jokic, Wembanyama,
can stretch the floor and shoot.
First players. Yeah. It's so different. Like, but I can't, growing up, like you see the stats, like a mediocre center today shot more three-pointers than Larry Bird did. And so I have a hard time
I know, but what I'm saying, I understand that difference. But what I'm saying is, if you took a Walton or a Ralph or some of these centers, like, and you allowed them to stretch the floor, I think that would the closest comparisons are guys 6'11" and bigger versus the skill, the athleticism of forwards and guards is just not the same. I mean, I always use one example. There's one guy from like the 80s, 90s that you could take out of that decade and put into this one, and physically it wouldn't look that different. And that's Karl Malone, because he was a complete physical freak outlier. And maybe Sean Kemp to a certain degree as well. But even like Dominique Wilkins, who I think might be the greatest dunker ever, he wasn't even 200 pounds. If you go back, I bet you he was like 190 or something like that. It's different physically.
And if I could,
quickly.
If I could chime in on the Wilt stuff.
Yeah.
Look, obviously I'm in my 40s. I've never seen him play. I've only seen the YouTube highlights. It is very,
Dominique was 210, by the way. I was wrong. Go.
When talking about Wilt, it's very difficult to evaluate him when you're watching YouTube highlights, and he looks like you versus my 10-year-old.
Well, that's what we're saying about Wembanyama. He looks like an alien. He looks totally different than anything we've seen, and that's what people said about Wilt too. That's what the comp is, that he was different than everybody else, and Wembanyama is different than everybody else. That's all.
But Wembanyama is going against Chet Holmgren, who himself looks like an alien. Wilt Chamberlain was going against people that look like the average plumber, and not to use the Reddit line.
Well, I don't know if Willis Reed and Bill Russell were plumbers, Ian. That's the kind of comment that you make sometimes that takes, a decent point, well thought out, and the truth will do, and you extend it into an area where, you lose everybody. Because I promise you, Willis Reed and Wes Unseld and Bill Russell were not your average plumbers. In fact, there were fewer teams, and that meant that the talent wasn't spread out. It was all sort of bunched up onto all those rosters. I got to go. I'm up against a hard break. If you want to weigh in, I know some of you are on hold. 301-230-0980. We do have an open line if you want to weigh in on Wemby's performance last night. Describe it in your own words. And then number two is, do you think OKC is done, or can they still win this series? 301-230-0980. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, the team980.com. We're free and live on the Odyssey app. from Chuck. Chuck writes, remember Magic's game 6. He didn't just play center. He played all 5 positions during the game, which makes it the greatest individual performance in NBA playoff history. Yeah, I know that. I know that he brought the ball up as a center because he was a point guard, but he started as the center and actually, I believe, was in the jump ball circle to start the game because Kareem wasn't there. I mean, it could have been Jamal Wilkes, I guess, because that was the team with Wilkes, because Wilkes had, I think, in that game 6, like 30-something as well. I'd have to go back and find that box score. Magic had 42, 15, and 7. And I think Jamal Wilkes went for 30-something too. I want to say 37 in that game. The two of them, I mean, can you imagine combining for 79 on the road in a closeout game without your captain, without Kareem? But yeah, no, I'm sure he played all 5 positions, but no center in that game, and he was a center on a lot of the possessions in that game. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. We are reacting to truly one of the greatest performances in NBA playoff history last night. It's not going to get carried away for me. I'm not going to, top Magic's game or Mike's 63 against the Celtics as a young player in his first playoff series ever. There have been unbelievable performances in NBA playoff history, but 41, 24, and 3 blocks in 49 minutes in a double overtime win against that team in that environment. And certainly he had a moment that we'll never forget at the end of the first overtime, down 3, in transition, catching, stopping on a dime, and firing a 28-foot three-pointer at 7'5" to tie the game was jaw-dropping to watch. He's different. I mean, there's no doubt. He is something we've never seen before, at least if you're a certain age. I can't tell you that I remember Wilt at all. And I do know that Wilt did not have the skills on the perimeter, obviously, that Wemby has, but the game was played so much differently back then. Lap's been on hold. Lap, describe Wemby's performance in your words, and then do you think OKC can come back in this series?
Man, OKC is going to be competitive if they don't hit them in the mouth and take it and run with it. But the series is going to be over, man, because it's hard. I mean, like you said, they don't have anybody to counter Wemby. You got 2 7-footers on OKC, but it's still a problem. And then Wemby, man, I mean, he's just the alien, man. I mean, we just ain't never seen nothing like this, man. I mean, and it was a good point you made about Karl Malone, because Karl Malone was so skilled, man. Just amazing talent, man. But you never seen anybody. I mean, and then some of the bigs, like you see now, like, I mean, what you saw DeMarcus Cousins when he played, you see Embiid, you see Jokic. I mean, this is just amazing. And it's just raw talent. He hasn't really tapped into his full potential. And the crazy thing, Kevin, man, we missed him by 1 ping pong ball, man. Yeah. So this is amazing.
That's a really that's a good reminder. Thanks for the call as always. If Washington had landed Wembanyama, how different our city would be from not only a sports perspective, but from a pop culture perspective, from so many different standpoints. I mean, the kind of revenue that basketball team would bring in to the city by playing these games. Can you imagine if the Wizards had gotten Wemby? What would I believe, and I know that not everybody agrees with me, but I've said it before and many times before. I do think that the Wizards are the true sleeping giant in this town. Like, they're the team out of the 4. We know what the football team is. We know that in terms of mass following, nothing can come close to it. Okay, it's just nothing in this town will ever come close to the masses that are interested in the football team. And the NFL, it's pretty much the case in almost every NFL city now. I mean, not everyone, but most. But the basketball team, the professional basketball team, is the one that could really run away with number 2. And if Wemby were playing for the Wizards right now, they'd easily be the number 2. Like, it wouldn't even be close. Wouldn't even be close. The Nats and Caps would be irrelevant compared to a Wemby-led Washington Wizards team. And it was one ping pong ball away from them getting him. By the way, the Karl Malone thing, it wasn't Karl Malone's skill. What I've always said about Karl Malone is that he's the one player from that era that physically would look no different if he were transported into 2026 from the players that are out there. He was 6'9", 6'10", and 260, when everybody else at 6'9" was 225 and 230, or even less than that. He was a man-child when there weren't a lot of them in the league. He physically looks like LeBron, and that's why, evolution, physical, nutrition, training, the whole thing. Karl Malone in 1997, 1998, you could take him 28, 30 years, almost 30 years later, and physically he wouldn't look any different. A lot of players would look physically much different because they're not only bigger and they're not only taller and better skilled, they're just bigger and stronger at every position. Let's go to Ivan. Ivan, go ahead.
Kevin, can you hear me?
I got you, Ivan.
Oh yeah, Kevin, you had a couple of moments in that game last night where OKC could have created that moment of doubt. Where if they're the young, if they're the one, they say the young teams have to lose before they win championships.
Yeah,
they had a couple of moments, but the Spurs overcame Kevin. And Kevin, I'm speaking blasphemy, but in three short seasons, Wembanyama, if he doesn't get injured, I think he's going to surpass Wilt as the most dominant player I've ever seen. Michael, may have been more athletic, and Michael had a stronger will to win. But Wilt was the most dominant player I've ever seen, and his stats, they speak for themselves. He's by himself with his stats. He was the most dominant player. But Wembanyama, he's going to surpass him, I think.
Don't you think we are still, like, we can see it coming? That's obvious. But he's 7'5" and like 230. When he's 7'5" and 265, that's when it's, or 250, let's just say, and he's physically mature, because I don't know that he is yet. When that happens, then I don't know that there's anybody on earth that will be able to stop him.
Kevin, he's going to surpass Wilt as being the most dominant, but I think he's also going to pass Michael with championships because he's got that compete gene and that will to win gene. If you look at their roster, Kevin, you got Harper, who doesn't even start. You got Kelvin Johnson, who was a sixth man of the year.
Yep.
I told you when I emailed you, Vassell is a dog. Castle he's a dog with championship pedigree.
Yeah.
And De'Aaron Fox, he's a key piece. He can control the ball. He's slick with the ball, and he can he's not going to let them get too far out of sync. He can run his team, and Champagne, however you pronounce it.
Yeah,
he's a shooter, and you add all of that. And you add a French freak to it, you got dynasty for a decade, Kevin. They're all 22 and 23 years old. The only problem I got is, I told you last night, is why in the world wouldn't they say, who's got Caruso? Don't leave the guy. He knocked down every open shot, and they wouldn't check him. He kept leaving him. And, Kevin, if they put Wembanyama down in the low post, how are they going to stop that? How are they going to stop it, Kevin? They can't.
What you do on the block is you have to double him. That doesn't stop him, but he's also a great passer. So
and he can make foul shots if they foul him. I mean,
he's a great free throw shooter.
He's got the complete package, Kevin. Something we haven't seen before, man. All right, have a good one, man.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Samaj. Samaj, finish it up for us. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Coach. Thanks for taking my call, Max. Appreciate you both. Man, Coach, the description from what I saw last night was to toggle on and piggyback with some other comments. It was very alien-esque. otherworldly. My man Wemby, who I like to refer to as AKA Groot, if you're familiar with the Galaxy people on the on the Marvel thing.
No,
Wemby is Groot.
Trust
I
you.
am Groot. Anyway, yeah, I mean, just aliening, man, otherworldly. He is everything that everyone has said, and be it that he is that outlier. Kev, you've spoken on many times, and I agree with you every time you say it. The general culture, the general path that is gaining an NBA championship, hoisting that O'Brien Trophy. Usually, teams got to pay dues. They got to get spoiled. They got to get some heartache. They got to get some major disappointment before they can climb the mountaintop. Well, just like Wemby is the outlier as a player, he may also be the guy that's an outlier for his team to make the team an outlier. The Spurs might damn well win this damn thing. And it'll, of course, be on the strength of Wemby being that outlier, that alien. They may go from non-playoff to championship. I mean, he's capable of taking them there. I didn't think it would be this year, but after what I saw last night. But I'm going to tell folks, let's not get carried away. This is the best of the NBA. And that comes down to coaches, too.
Yeah.
And Dagnall has showed me that he's a great coach to this point. And I think we need to, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's see what Dagnall can do as far as his adjustments. And let's see how the series carries forward.
I'll tell you what, there were moments last night when Oklahoma City came back. Thanks for the call, Samaj. There were moments where you saw what you saw last year with OKC in the postseason. They swarm defensively. They're so good, off pick and rolls, where either they switch or they take the defender and they hedge and they run the ball literally out to the half court line. There were so many loose balls that Oklahoma City created, loose ball situations in the 2 overtimes, that San Antonio got a little bit lucky retrieving. There was one where, they had San Antonio completely discombobulated in their offensive set with their defense. And the ball's loose, it's on the ground, it's getting fumbled around, and somehow Harper grabs it. And in one motion with like a second left on the shot clock, fires one up, and he got fouled because they were wrestling for the ball, and they called the foul. He goes to the free throw line. I still think Oklahoma City defensively is capable of creating enough on the perimeter, enough chaos on the perimeter to turn. And now they didn't have De'Aaron Fox last night, and Castle had 11 turnovers. They had 21 turnovers in total. But it's what OKC can do to you. They can really get you into sort of a chaotic state, and they can score that way. And it happens in bunches. When you watch them, all of a sudden it's like swarming, and it's a 12-0 run, quickly. They actually had some runouts they didn't score on, and this wasn't against Wemby on 2-on-1s and after turnovers. They missed some opportunities with the game on the line. Loose balls that somehow the Spurs came up with. A ball that got knocked off of Chet Holmgren's shoe when it looked, they called it initially OKC ball, and it was challenged and given to the Spurs. So there were a lot of fine line moments in that game where OKC could have gotten over the top and secured the win. I already mentioned the one moment when Jalen Williams in the first overtime, this was the play prior to Wembanyama's 28-foot three that tied it, but they had the ball and a 3-point lead with still 12 seconds left on the shot clock with 33 on the game clock. And Jalen Williams, fired up a shot that was not in their offense. It was nobody near the offensive glass, and he missed badly. And that's what turned into a transition opportunity where Castle threw in back to Wemby. Wemby was the trailer, and he caught it, no dribbles, caught it, spotted up, and fired it from 28 feet to tie the game. But there were opportunities there for Oklahoma City to win the game. I know they were down by 10, and they had to come back, and they did it with defense. They are really good defensively. It's just such a hard matchup. If the best way I think they can defend Wemby is by defending the perimeter. They've got to really make it hell on Castle, Harper, Fox when he comes back, because they got to make those entry passes difficult. But how do you guard the post? Sometimes you guard the post by guarding the passer on the perimeter really well and really hard. And I think OKC can do that. And you saw some of it last night. So I'm not counting them out. They are deep. They are good defensively. I'll tell you what, they got to come up with better answers to the double team on SGA, though. Just better answers overall. And Holmgren's going to have to play better. Holmgren's going to have to make Wemby come out and guard him. And he's capable of it. Not last night. Great basketball game. Unbelievable performance. Really special to watch that last night. Bill Barnwell from ESPN wrote a story last week on the popularity as the season went on last year of 3 tight ends in a game, and the team that really got rolling with it, and he thinks it could become an even bigger part of the game this coming season, even with teams like Washington. Bill Barnwell from ESPN next. Joining me right now is ESPN's Bill Barnwell, one of my favorites to read. Bill writes prolifically for ESPN.com and does so on so many interesting topics, the most recent of which, Bill, got my attention. Bill wrote about the Rams' switch to more 13 personnel during the season last year. 13 personnel is one running back, 3 tight ends. That leaves you with 1 wide receiver. 11 personnel is 1 running back, 1 tight end. That's 3 receivers on the field. And that's primarily what the Rams have run under Sean McVay. But they made a switch, Bill, last year to much more 13 personnel. Share with my listeners the event or the game in which Sean decided this was the way to go.
It was Puka Nacua getting hurt, and that was an unlikely source, right? I mean, the Rams, for the entirety, really, of the Sean McVay era, have been an 11 personnel team. 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. The number of times they ran 13 personnel in a full season in prior years, including 2024, you could count it on one hand and not use all of your fingers. So they were really an 11 personnel team up and down the field. And then Nacua gets hurt last year in October. They don't really have a lot of confidence in their wideouts beyond Devontae Adams. They have a lot of tight ends. Sean McVay gives it a shot. They played 13 personnel about 35% of the time against the Jaguars in London. They blow out Jacksonville, which ended up being a pretty good football team.
Right.
And even when Nacua came back, they stuck with it. They did have Devontae Adams get hurt later in the year, which helped. But even into the postseason, the Rams ran 13 personnel about 44% of the time, triple anybody else in football over that span. And other teams have run 13 personnel. Sean McVay didn't invent going with bigger bodies. We could talk about sort of the logic underpinning all that, but we know when Sean McVay does something, it has a little more influence than when anybody else in football does it. And so I do think you're seeing teams looking at what the Rams did last year, including possibly the Commanders, and saying, hey, let's try to emulate that, and let's try to get the advantages that it afforded the Rams last season with our own offense.
So let me just make sure everybody followed that. So Puka Nacua got hurt in October of last year. They had a game in London against Jacksonville. They blew Jacksonville out, running more 13 personnel in that one game than Sean McVay had essentially run in his entire career as the head coach of the LA Rams. He decided not to replace Puka Nacua with other receivers. He put more tight ends on the field. So what did he take out of that game? And then in sticking with it for the majority of the rest of the season, including into the postseason, as a primary way of running offense, what were the big takeaways?
Yeah, what it really did, Kevin, was sort of get that linebacker back on the field, that third linebacker that's gone away from the NFL. Since we've seen teams go smaller, play more spread offenses, the NFL has changed on defense. That third linebacker typically comes off the field on passing downs. We see teams respond with nickel defense. They pay their slot corners more. They don't really value that third linebacker. And that's what McVay and Kyle Shanahan and those offenses wanted to exploit. They throw over the middle of the field. They throw play action. They play from under center, which I'm sure we're going to get to in this conversation. But they want to stretch those linebackers and exploit them in coverage with, obviously, wide receivers, but running backs and tight ends as well. And so what 13 personnel did was it got that linebacker back on the field. Teams saw 3 tight ends, and outside of Seattle, which played nickel pretty much all the time, no matter who was on the other side of the field, teams typically said, hey, we see 3 tight ends, we're sending that third linebacker back on the field. And for McVay, that was an opportunity. His tight ends were not incredible. He didn't have a Trey McBride or a Brock Bowers, but he had guys who could beat the other team's third best linebacker in coverage. And so they were able to exploit that. And I do think that's sort of at the core of what made it work, is that, you know, as an offensive play caller, you're sort of trying to figure out, okay, not only why are we calling plays, but also what does that do to the defense? What can we learn from the defense? And if you're playing 13 personnel and you have the team in their base defense, well, there's only so many looks teams have to defend 13 personnel. There's only certain amounts of personnel you can put on the field on defense to match that. And so you're sort of limiting what the defense can call for those plays. And then, of course, if you limit the defensive playbook and you only have certain checks against 13 personnel or against bunches or having the formation into the boundary, all these things that you can do to kind of manipulate the defense, okay, you only have one way to deal with this. And once we see that, we know how we can exploit it. And so it's not only about just getting big bodies on the field, it's also kind of an information finding thing for great offensive coaches like Sean McVay.
You know, when you mentioned Seattle, I the first thing that popped into my mind is Nick Amanawari was, for all intents and purposes, a safety who also looked like a linebacker on the field. So I'm wondering, is that why they were able to get away with it? I mean, look, Seattle won those last two games against the Rams, but it's not because they were super dominant defensively in those games. It was special teams plays that really cost the Rams more than anything. But is that why that one specific player, they were able to stay in nickel?
You're correct. That is totally true. And that was having a defensive player who can hold up in coverage in that spot, in the slot, or, playing in the field, but also then holding up against the run. Because Seattle was playing very light boxes against the run. They were playing with 2 linebackers, 4 defensive linemen. So they're basically daring teams to run the football. And so when you do that, your defensive backs all need to tackle well. Devon Witherspoon, who also plays in the slot, is a very good tackler as well. But you needed them in Warrior to be a physical force, and he was. He was great against the run. He was great, fending off blocks. And that was what made that work for Seattle. So many other teams could not do that. And even if they tried to emulate it, could not get it to work because they didn't have the same personnel. So that was really kind of a skeleton key for the Seahawks on defense all the way to the Super Bowl.
What happens when you're in 13 personnel a lot more than teams have been in it over the years to things like explosive play rate? Like, what about explosive plays? Passes over 20-plus yards.
You can create them plenty because, again, you're getting that defense on the field. And so with those linebackers, with, you're upping your play action rate when you're operating at 13 personnel, which does create more explosives. But it's really interesting, Kevin. And this is why I think, I can write all this piece about how great 13 personnel is. I can give you all the logic for it. But the reality is, you look around the NFL, anyone else besides the Rams or maybe the Bills who weren't running 13 personnel, they stunk at it. 13 personnel was a disaster for teams who ran it a lot last year outside of some of the best.
Who were some of the teams that ran it a lot and failed last year?
Steelers are a great example of a team that ran a ton of 13 personnel. And it made sense. They had a lot of tight ends who were talented players, but it did not necessarily add up to a very effective offense. Go back a couple of years under Kevin Stefanski, the Browns were a heavy 13 personnel team with Baker Mayfield there. And then before Deshaun Watson got there, they became more of a spread offense. That offense was okay here and there, but it wasn't like they were dominating with 13 personnel the way the Rams did. And so this isn't like some solution. You can just say, okay, we're just going to get a bunch of tight ends, put them on the field, and it solves our problems. It's not that easy. You have to also make it work in the context of your broader offense. And so I do think those explosives trying to take shots downfield is an essential piece of making this work. If you're just using 13 personnel to run the ball and throw short, you're not going to do it well. You're not going to have opportunities to create stuff. You need to be creating explosives. And that's what the Rams did so well with their entire offense last year, but especially at a 13 personnel versus other offenses in the NFL.
The one thing, as you mentioned, the Steelers, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind is, number one, they didn't have another receiver outside of Metcalf.
Right.
Number two is they played a lot of really good defensive teams. They played Cleveland twice. They played Green Bay. They played Seattle. I mean, they played, I thought, at the end of the year, the best defensive team in the NFL in Houston in that playoff game. And I don't know, did the Rams have, I mean, they've obviously played Seattle 3 times over the last month and a half of this. But I guess part of my where I'm headed with this is, does personnel in Pittsburgh's case, and maybe even in Cleveland's case, personnel probably drove that decision as much as anything else, right?
Yeah, of course. And I think that's the sort of the fascinating thing about why the Rams did it, right? Because they had 2 great wide receivers in Nakua and Devontae Adams. And for most of the year, those guys were both healthy. Nakua only missed 1 week. He actually got hurt in the Ravens game, I believe, in the middle of that Ravens game, and then missed the 1 Jags game. So he was back. pretty quick. Adams got hurt late in the year, but he was healthy for most of the year. And they still stuck with 13 personnel, even though it meant taking a really good player, one of those two wide receivers, off the field for chunks of the game. And so that's why I think for these teams who drafted tight ends in the second and third round, they're leaning into it with their personnel. Is that going to work? I'm a little skeptical.
Yeah.
Just because I think the Rams are a really good fit for it in a lot of ways that maybe some other offenses were not.
Who was the toughest matchup of the tight ends for them? Was it Higbee?
Oh, it depends because they use them in different ways. I would say Parkinson was the toughest. I think he was more of the yards after catch guy. And what you really notice, when I went back and watched every single Rams snap of last season, 13, 12, 11, didn't matter. I watched every single snap before I went and wrote that column. And what was fascinating is how aggressive they were in running those tight ends downfield. It wasn't like they were running short routes. They were running typical tight end routes. They were running 4 verticals with their tight ends at a 13 person on a regular basis. They were lining up Terrence Ferguson, their second-round pick, splitting him out wide and just throwing back shoulders to him like he was, A.J. Brown or Jamar Chase. And that is a kind of a rare thing to do with a tight end.
Well, they were huge. I mean, those guys were so big, yeah.
Right. So, I think that's the fascinating thing is that they sort of saw that as an opportunity to create mismatches in a different sort of way. I think Parkinson is the best receiving tight end of the bunch. He's the smoothest. He has the best hands. But they really are an offense where, because they're so narrow to begin with, they're the narrowest offense in football on a pre-snap basis. So they are already an offense that's very in line. They're really trying to get those linebackers to figure into the coverages. They're trying to create some communication issues with the defensive side of the ball in terms of motion, in terms of who's guarding who. And then you're subbing in wide receivers for tight ends. You're creating more problems. And again, you're adding that other linebacker on the field. But you can still take those shots vertically. And McVay was very comfortable doing that with Matthew Stafford.
So you went back and watched every offensive snap from the Rams season. I'm curious. This is a bit of a diversion from where we were, but I've said many times since the season ended, Seattle was super impressive. I'm not taking anything away from them, and they were just incredible defensively. But never for a moment, including after they destroyed New England in the Super Bowl, did I think there was a better team last year than the Rams. And I would put Seattle as the second best team. I know that's insane because they beat them twice, but it was so flukish how they did it in that Thursday night game with, the 2-point conversion after the punt returned by Sheehan. And then you had the fumbled punt in the NFC Championship game. Like, I really thought last year, and I thought the Rams defense sort of waned a little bit towards the end of the year, especially pass defense. But I thought that was one of the better teams we've seen in a while, the Rams of last year.
I think the offense and the defense, we're just considering those two things, are after the best team in football. I really do.
Yeah.
But the Seahawks had the best special teams in football.
They did.
The Rams, if it had just been one bad game, I would sit here and say, you know what, that's bad luck. But the Rams special teams were terrible all season. It cost them against the Eagles, where they had the block field goal at the end of the game. Right. It cost them against the Niners, where they missed an extra point and making a big difference. It cost them against the Panthers. It cost them against the Seahawks multiple times. They had a punt return touchdown to Rashid Shaheed to get back in the game, and they fumble a punt away in the postseason as well. I mean, if you're having it happen week after week after week, if you're firing your special teams coordinator in mid-season, which the Rams did, I think that speaks to it being kind of this really meaningful problem. And so, it's not the most important part of the game, but it can be a game decider. And it really was a legitimate problem for the Rams all season.
One other thing on 13 personnel. Let's just say that this becomes a bit of a trend, and the tight ends, the number of tight ends selected in the draft, and by the way, the Rams selected a tight end in the second round from Ohio State. But let's just say that the number of snaps increases in 13 personnel around the league. Will salaries at the tight end spot and linebacker spot follow? Because we all know, where linebacker and tight end is sort of fallen in the compensation on the compensation chart. By the way, I think you said it. I think you said it's a cheaper way to play. It is cheaper. Those positions are less expensive, defensively and offensively.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is. And I think if if you're a team like the Rams and you're spending a lot at Matthew Stafford, You're going to be spending a lot on Puka Nacua. You're spending on Kyron Williams. A couple of your linemen are going to be expensive or are expensive already. You're spending a lot on your defense because that defense is very cheap now, but it's going to get very expensive very soon. They just signed, of course, Trent McDuffie, who they traded the first-round pick to acquire. But one of the ways to mitigate that, to have a cheap quarterback, which they just drafted Ty Simpson, that's going to be their long-term vision there, but also to replace those second and third wide receivers if they're going to cost you what Devontae Adams cost you, or Tutu Atwell, who's making $10 million last year, cost you. Replacing those guys with tight ends and getting a position that costs typically half as much on the open market as wide receiver, that's one way to do it. And so I do think you're seeing teams, not just the Rams, I think around the league saying, hey, if you go to Justin Jefferson, yeah, that's worth it. Jamar Chase, yeah, you're going to pay those guys. They're truly special. But in that $20 million a year range, would you rather have Trey McBride and George Kittle, or would you rather have, Alec Pierce for $8 million a year more? I think a lot of teams would say Kittle and McBride in the vacuum, but wide receiver is just a much more expensive position.
So Washington in the 24 draft selected Ben Sinnott out of Kansas State in the second round. He has not produced much at all, but after David Blau got elevated to offensive coordinator, which, by the way, Bill, they loved him the moment they brought him into the building. I went back to see what Adam Peters said about Ben Sinnott. And do you know who he compared Sinnott to when he drafted him? Kyle Juszczyk.
Wow.
And so now that makes me believe that, they're going to be, we all believe they'll be under center a lot more. I mean, Quinn's talked about it and they've all talked about it. And I certainly see a lot more play action pass attempts in the offense. I think those two things are given about what they'll be doing offensively. But then I thought about what he said about Sinnott, and I'm like, well, maybe that's the third tight end. Maybe he's actually a fullback. I mean, maybe not legitimately lining up in the backfield, but maybe on some snaps. But tell me what you think about Blau and what Washington's going to do offensively this season, and maybe just give me your quick thoughts on Sinnott.
Yeah, I mean, it's not brand new, right? I mean, you go back to Chris Cooley, and Chris Cooley was an H-back at times where he lined up in the backfield, even though he was a different sort of tight end. But it's a fascinating choice. I mean, in the NFL right now, when we talk about how smooth it is to get transitions from the college game to the pro game for these quarterbacks, and a lot of teams do install stuff that makes sense for what a quarterback did at the college level. And we saw that, and it was a plus for the first couple of years with the Commanders, first year with the Commanders at least, for Cliff Kingsbury, that Jaden Daniels was in a very comfortable, very familiar scheme. He was operating out of pistol, operating out of shotgun. There was a lot of RPOs, a lot of quarterback run game, a lot of, a different kind of offense, not a ton of play action, and definitely very little, if any at all, under center play action, the sort of stuff David Blau is going to run with him this year. And so it's a really fascinating choice. I mean, they very easily could have leaned further into that Kingsbury style of offense or the Jaden Daniels style of offense. There's shotgun-heavy offenses that work. There's RPO games that work. They could have hired a college coach who's familiar with that stuff, who was just doing a better job of it maybe than Cliff Kingsbury was. They could have kept Cliff. I mean, it wouldn't have been crazy for them to keep Cliff Kingsbury for another season. So you're asking a very talented quarterback, certainly, and I think very highly of Jaden Daniels' skills, but you're asking him to change his game 2 years into his NFL career. This is going to be very new. It's going to be growing pains. But I do think there's opportunities to be gained here in terms of the play action game and creating more explosives, operating over the middle of the field and working the middle of the field, creating yards after catch opportunities, playing to Jaden Daniels' strengths as a runner and as a creator out of structure. Even last year with the Rams, again, watching all those stats, they ran a ton of under center play action boot camp where it was Matthew Stafford, who's not exactly as spry as Jaden Daniels, running play action, getting out to the flat, finding an open receiver. And if you can make that offense work, the Seahawks did it with Sam Darnold, Rams did it with Stafford, it was such a reliable and effective way to create chunk gains on the offensive side of the ball. And so there's a universe. This works out really well. And for Ben Sinnott, like you said, it's been really a tertiary, if even, piece of the offense over the past few years. There's a way for him to be a reliable source, a useful player in the context of the offense, lining up as a fullback, lining up as an M9 tight end, lining up as an H-back, lining up as a sniffer. There's lots of ways to make that work. They have John Bates, who is a very good blocking tight end, who I think is a perfect fit for what they want to do. We'll see with Chickacompo. I think he's flashed real athletic upside over the course of his time in Tennessee, but, he'll have a 60-yard game and then he'll disappear for a month. And that could be a product of the quarterback play. It could be a product of maybe he's not a reliable receiver. I would love to have them add maybe, a receiving option at tight end, another pass catcher if they were going to play more 13. But I'm fascinated to see what this offense looks like. It is going to be one of the more interesting stories schematically about this upcoming season.
Yeah, no doubt. Just having him on the field, fingers crossed for, a lot more games. He played 4 complete football games start to finish last year. So, keeping him healthy and upright should change a lot. What's interesting is, they went out and signed Chickacompo, as you mentioned. They've also, just subtly, Quinn has mentioned Lawrence Cager, who was a practice squad tight end who actually really looked the part in the preseason last year. Not that means anything, but as a pass catching tight end. And I just have a feeling they're going to lean into that. They're going to want to run the football. And to me, just the idea of him under center with that boot game and him being out on the edge as a bootleg passer, if they can get that outside zone, sort of working in the run game. Wow. Because like you said, I've watched Kirk do it here last year when he came in, he was much more under center towards, than he was the year before. And, he labors on that boot to get out there like Stafford does, but still very successful. You get a guy threatening a defense with his legs on that play too. It could be really exciting. So what are your overall thoughts on Washington? I think there's a real low expectation bar for them among a lot of the national NFL, pundits and media types like you. I have not heard what you think of Washington in 26. Go ahead. Give me a minute on them.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I mean, we were having this conversation last summer where I was skeptical of the 25 Commanders. I will say, I did not think they were going to go 5-12. I think they were a little unlucky to be quite as bad. Like you said, the Jaden Daniels injury, they only forced 10 turnovers on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they're going to be better. But what I keep coming back to, is this idea of just, they almost got to cut the line when they started this rebuild under Dan Quinn. Because the Ron Rivera era, or I like Ron Rivera a lot as a person, that era delivered basically nothing in the draft. A couple pieces here and there. Right. Sam Cosmi is a good player, but they didn't have a young core of talent to work with. So they signed a lot of free agents. Obviously, the Austin Ecklers, the Bobby Wagners, the Zach Ertzes, they hit in year one, whether it's injuries or decline in play because they got a little older, they don't hit in year two. And so now you're starting over a little bit with this roster because a lot of those free agents filled in, unfortunately, not up to expectations. There's still some talent here, obviously, from the first 2 Adam Peters' draft. Jaden Daniels, of course. Josh Connerly played well, or played better, I should say, as the year went along. Struggled, obviously, early on in pass pro. I thought he improved as the year went along. Mike Saban still was excellent as a rookie, maybe not quite at that level in year 2. But the guys they signed this offseason to improve the defense, which is really where they had to take a step forward, a lot of them are players who are in the prime of their careers. It's not guys in their early 30s or mid-30s. It's not just, hey, let's plug and play and hope we land, a guy who can just be a warm body and just hold his own and know where to go with the assignments. Not saying, it was really good for the Chargers second half of last season after that trade. Caleb on Chason, I thought a guy who I had written off with the Jaguars, okay with the Raiders. He was really good with the Patriots last year. A real difference maker, especially late in games, made plays to seal up games for the Patriots. Nick Robinson, I went back to watch the Lions play against the Rams. Nick Robinson had a good game against the Rams. I think he's a very underrated cornerback over the course of his run. I think you're getting a lot of talent out in terms of guys who, talent's the wrong word, getting a lot of guys out who I think their names were bigger than their play, especially last season. The Marshawn Lattimores, the Bobby Wagners, those guys were, rightly seen as important players for this team. They were not up to the expectations, even before Lattimore Eckert, of course, up to the expectations that they were expected. I think there's a much more talented defense here. I think Dan Quinn's still a good defensive coach. I don't think he suddenly forgot how to coach defense. to me, I think this is so much about just how does that offensive switch flip. If Jaden Daniels is a great fit for this offense, I think he has talent to fit in any offense. If you coach it up right and get the stuff going correctly, that's going to be a really good football team. And if not, and if they're playing a lot of Marcus Mariota and the offense is inconsistent, well, then I don't think the defense is going to be good enough to overcome that. Yeah. I think the defense is going to be better, and I think the offense has one of the widest ranges of possible outcomes for any team in football this year.
All right, last one. There's a lot of conversation in this market about Brandon Ayuk, number one. There's been more recent conversation about Stephon Diggs. What do you think happens between now and opening day? Do they add another playmaker, another wide receiver? And if so, which of the two is it?
I still think it's Ayuk just because it's always made sense, right? I mean, it's always been the logical place for Ayuk to go. It's always been the logical place for the Commanders to go. From the Niners' perspective, they have no rush. I'm sure you talked about this. They can wait until basically before week one and then cut Ayuk. And, you know, teams will do their players favors. I don't think the Niners want to do Brandon Ayuk any favors. They want to try and get a draft pick for Brandon Ayuk, but I don't think anyone wants to absorb that contract. And so I do think it's going to be Ayuk. Stephon Diggs, probably the player I would want more given how he played last year. He was incredibly efficient while playing about half the snaps for the Patriots. I don't know what anyone could possibly expect from Brandon Ayuk or feel confident about from Brandon Ayuk having not played in over a year after tearing his ACL. But the Adam Peters thing, it just makes too much sense. I think, unfortunately, because it's going to get sprung along until late in the summer, be a situation where he's sort of still getting his way back into football shape, back into the organization, into the offense in the first few weeks of the year. Maybe a guy for the second half of 2026, but it does feel like there's a wide open roster spot waiting for a wide receiver, and Brandon Ayuk would make perfect sense.
You and I agree on that, in that the 49ers don't need to do him any favors. They don't need to do a competing team in their own conference, a favor. Not with the way, this, at least from the outside looking in, seems to have gone. As always, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. Hope you're well.
I'm always happy to do it, Kevin. Anytime you need me, feel free to reach out.
Bill Barnwell, everybody from ESPN. A returning injured player for Washington next season had something to say about his team starting quarterback. That's next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
Next one coming in line to right center field. On the run is Weimer. Can't get there. This will clear the bases with Bichette heading for second base. And the Mets have put 10 runs on the board. 2-run double for Bichette. It's now the Mets 16 and the Nationals 6. Mercy, mercy.
Charlie Slows last night on the call with Dave Jagler, of course, on our sister station 106.7 The Fan. The Nats gave up 10 runs in the top of the 12th. If it seems like a lot, it is. New York, the Mets, that is, became the first National League team to score at least 10 runs in an extra inning since the 1919 Cincinnati Reds had 10 in the 13th inning against the Brooklyn Dodgers. That was a long time ago, more than 100 years ago, 107 to be exact. The Nats lost 16-7 to the surging Mets. You know, the Mets and Phillies both started the season off very poorly in the National League East, with Atlanta starting very hot, but both the Mets and the Phillies have been among the hottest teams recently. The Mets have won 6 of their last 7. The Nats drop from 500 with 2 straight losses back to 2 games under 500. They are currently, as they have been for much of the season, one of the highest scoring teams in baseball, currently the highest scoring team in baseball. Nobody has generated as much offense run-wise as the Nats have. They have 262 runs in 48 games. Nobody's really that close right now. The closest, the Atlanta Braves, have 250 runs in the same number of games. But on the flip side, the Nats have given up the most runs in the league as well, 284, not really close to the Houston Astros, who have 15 less allowed. Yeah, a rough night, especially for Nats pitcher Paxton Schultz, who came in that 11th inning in a baseball game at the time that was tied up at 8 apiece. The game went to extra innings at 7 apiece. He came in top of the 12th, and he gave up in just 1/3 of an inning because he got his first batter out. After that, he couldn't get anybody out. He gave up 5 hits, 6 earned runs, 7 total runs, walked a batter as well in just 25 pitches. Not a good outing from Paxton Schultz. They brought Vivas in from the outfield to finish it off, and then even tried to bring Schultz back into the game. It was a little bit messy there at the end, but it didn't matter. The Mets had at that point, a big lead. They had a 16-6 lead. They won the game 16-7. James Wood, by the way, 3 for 6. He is having himself certainly an all-star worthy season. Last night, we talked so much about, in the first hour of the show, so much about Wemby and San Antonio's double overtime win over Oklahoma City in Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. Tonight, by the way, the Knicks host Cleveland in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. The Knicks are 7.5-point favorites. They have not played since last weekend, as in the weekend before this one just finished. They've been off for a while, having swept their last series. In hockey last night, there was an amped-up Buffalo crowd for a 7th and deciding game at home in the second round of the NHL playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens. They fell behind 2-0. They came back in the third and tied it 2-2. But then, I mean, Game 7, overtime, I didn't see it, wasn't watching it. I was watching the basketball, but I can only imagine. What were you doing, Max? Were you watching this?
Yes, I was watching this last night because it was about midway through the second period. I saw that Montreal was up 2-0, and then moments later, Buffalo made it 2-1. And that's when I was like, all right, time to tap in, time to lock in. We're at the last 30 minutes of a crucial Game 7. And credit to Buffalo, man. They fought all the way back, made it 2-2, brought them to overtime. That crowd was jumping, but, man, it was just a hard-fought game all around. And Montreal, they get some Game 7 luck yet again, just like last time over Tampa
let's
Bay.
hear
Where
it.
they
Let's hear the game winner
Let's
in
hear
overtime.
Let's listen.
Pressured by Demidov. The puck is free and taken by Alexander Carrier. Headmans the puck. Shot. Score! Montreal wins Game 7.
I know I say this all the time.
Sean's great.
Does anybody do everything great like Sean McDonough does? Like, I just don't know that he does anything other than top tier. Hockey may be his best thing, and he's really good at football. Alex Newhook, by the way, that game winner came 8 minutes and 53 seconds into 11 minutes and 22 seconds, into overtime to win it for Montreal 3-2. Montreal got a Game 7 game winner from the same player in the first round against the Lightning. That is just the second time in NHL postseason history that a player has had back-to-back Game 7 game winners in the same postseason. So you get Montreal, Carolina, right?
Yeah, and Carolina has also
Colorado,
been off.
Vegas, West.
Yes. Yeah, Colorado, Vegas yet again. And Carolina, one thing, they've been off for, I think, 11 days at this point. Yeah, so it's a big rest versus rust. But these two teams are really similarly built. Carolina's and Montreal are both super young, super fast, super agile teams. So it's going to be really, really fun conference finals on both sides.
I'm assuming Carolina is a big favorite and Colorado is a big favorite. Am I right? I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, the 1 seeds are pretty heavily favored. Carolina hasn't lost yet in the playoffs, and the Avs have only dropped a couple. So
yeah, we're getting the 2 1 seeds. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. I'm looking at it right now. The 2 best records in hockey. We don't always get that. And we might not get that
There's
because
still time.
Montreal could face Vegas. Although both of those teams were pretty good. Vegas won their division. Montreal finished tied for second in the Atlantic. All right. So some good hockey last night.
Some great
I know that Buffalo crowd from the jump of the playoffs has been as good as any. They've been hungry for something for a long, long time. All right. Dietrich Wise, remember him? Important offseason signing last year. Needed an edge-setting defensive end, somebody who could help stop the run. Washington not very good in 24 against the run. That was a real priority of last offseason. We got to find players that can help us stop the run. And Dietrich Wise, came in as a free agent from New England, 30 years old, and had been sort of this, 6'5", 285, 290 pound edge setting defensive end. And the truth is, last year in the first 2 games, he played pretty well against the Giants and the Packers. But he got injured in that Packer game, lost for the season. But he, like Dorrance Armstrong, are both expected back. They had to re-sign Dietrich Wise to bring him back. Dorrance Armstrong was under contract. They were, certainly Dorrance Armstrong was the best defensive player on the team, and he only played 7 games last year before getting injured against Dallas in week 7. But Wise is coming back, and he should certainly be a part of the rotation. But he said something yesterday. He was on a podcast.
I think it was
Matt?
NFL Network.
He was on the NFL Network.
Yeah, just doing a little quick hit.
Doing a quick hit with the NFL Network. And he said this about his team's quarterback.
You weren't the only guy who got injured last year. It felt like it was just one of those seasons where nobody could stay healthy in Washington, including your quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who dealt with a lot through his second year in the NFL. Sometimes through those trials, you learn things about yourself. You've seen Jaden a little bit, at least, I would imagine, coming back in this offseason. What do you anticipate seeing from him as he goes into year 3?
Well, really, everybody's hungry. Everybody's hungry. Everybody's ready to go. And our leader, Jaden Daniels, is doing his thing as well. He's phenomenal. He has that look in his eyes that he's ready to take over the league.
League takeover incoming.
Take over the league. Yeah, play the question again real quickly. Who was that asking the question? Do you know?
I believe it was Pelissero or Garofalo. I'm not familiar with how their voices sound.
All right,
You weren't the only guy who got injured last year. It felt like it was just one of those seasons where nobody could stay healthy in Washington, including your quarterback, Jaden Daniels, who dealt with a lot through his second year in the NFL. Sometimes through those trials, you learn things about yourself. You've seen Jaden a little bit, at least, I would imagine, coming back in this offseason. What do you anticipate seeing from him as he goes into year 3?
I wonder what Jaden's learned from last year. You know, that was when we had Quinn on now 2 months ago. I said, what can you take away from a season like this one where you were just constantly in flux with the players that were going to play for you? You weren't even sure during a given week who was going to be available and who wasn't. What can you take away from it? What can you learn from it? And he said, it's really hard to learn from that kind of a season, but you have to go back and you've got to see why it happened in terms of being the most injured team frontline starter in the last 7 years in the NFL. That is something we got to check. Did we practice in a way that led to all of these injuries? Was it our training? Was it our nutrition? Was it the way we handled the injuries when they happened? I mean, you know, I don't think I said this to Quinn because it would have been a little bit obnoxious, but could have said one way to protect your quarterback is when you're down 31 with 8 minutes to go in the game, maybe not have him run RPOs. Maybe not have him in the game at all. That would certainly be something that I would imagine they learned from last year. Like, that would be number one on the board. What did we learn from last year? When we are getting our ass kicked on, was that a Sunday night game, the Seattle game?
Yep, sure was.
Game? Sunday night game. When we're getting our ass kicked on Sunday Night Football to the tune of down 31 with 8 minutes to go, and we've got the likes of, you know, Robbie Chosen and Chris Moore and Traylon Burks, who just arrived 3 days earlier, and all sorts of players that we had to introduce ourselves to earlier in the week on the field. That is, you know, we're going to save ourselves for a sunnier day. This is a rainy day, and it's not going to work. We're not going to win. We're going to pull our starting quarterback from the game, and we're going to put Marcus Mariota in the game, and he's going to play. Or if we're going to leave our starting quarterback in the game, he is going to do one thing and one thing only. He is going to take a snap, and he's going to hand the ball off to Bill Krosky-Merritt or to Chris Rodriguez or whomever was in the game that night. That would be an actual, you know, area of, okay, nutrition check, training check, the way the doctors handle the injuries check. Hey, I'm not going to have our quarterback run an RPO down 31 with 8 minutes to go because something bad could happen. More likely than not, it won't happen, but there's only one way it will happen, and that is if we call that play with him in the game. That really, those are the things that just drive me crazy. Self-inflicted, totally self-inflicted. You know, I go back to Jaden's first game as a rookie in Tampa. I still can't believe down 37-13. Was that the score? Something like that. What was the final score of that Tampa game? 37-20. It was 37-13 at the end. I mean, we're at the 2-minute warning. I mean, they're down 24 points, 37-13. It ain't happening. And you got your rookie quarterback in his very first game running read option at the goal line on a condensed field, which is even harder. And he took some shots. That was stupid. Him in the game against Seattle running an RPO was stupid. I know an RPO, typically he's just going to throw the ball. It's going to get out quickly. But on a condensed field in the red zone, sometimes you think it's there and it wasn't. He kept it and dislocated his elbow. So that's that. But what could Jaden have legitimately learned from last season? I don't know what he could have learned. I guess even when you have to run to keep the team alive, you got to be more careful. I think that's probably, you know, top 2 or 3 areas of we got to live to fight another day. We can't take, no matter how competitive we are, we can't treat 2nd and 8 in the first quarter like it's 4th and 2 in the fourth quarter of a tie game. We have to recognize game situation management in terms of the decisions we make with the football. Jaden plays, and this is the one thing, and I know it concerns many of you. Jaden plays the first quarter 3-3, 8 minutes to go, 1st and 10, the same way he plays fourth quarter 24-23, have the ball down 1, and it's 4th and 3. You can't do that. You've got to understand game situation, and, you have to assess the risk worth. Is it worth taking this kind of risk? You're never going to get him, and I would never want him on 4th and 5 in the fourth quarter down 7 to do anything other than dive head first to try to move the chains and keep the ball and keep the game alive. There's always going to be risk in those situations, but he can't take those risks in other game situations that aren't nearly as pressing. I think that through the first 2 years, that has to be part of the takeaways for Jaden Daniels. I mean, I think about last year. We've been through this so many times. I just am in disagreement with many of you who say that when he did play, which was barely, he wasn't very good. I completely disagree with that. I think week 1 is always a bit of, a figure it out week, a head fake week, and he was fine against the Giants. He didn't look like he did against Atlanta or Detroit in the playoffs or Tampa in the playoffs or even Philadelphia in the playoffs. He didn't look like that. That's true. And I remember coming out of the game, he didn't really look like last year, but it's week 1. It's week 1, and he and Terry weren't together, and they barely played football. They haven't been tackled since the NFC Championship game, and he still threw for 233, and a touchdown, no picks, and rushed for 68 yards and had, his QBR was over 50 in the game. That's a solid game. And I thought he had a solid game in a 21-6 win over the Giants. Week 2, unquestionably, was not a good outing, not only for him, but for anybody. They got absolutely manhandled by Green Bay up front. They didn't have much of a shot. He certainly did take some shots and get hurt. He wasn't sharp throwing the football, had a very low completion percentage for him in that game. Didn't throw a pick, took a couple of sacks, wasn't really able to run the ball. They couldn't run the ball at all. That was a mismatch on a short week. Nobody played well. He didn't play well either. The Charger game was the game that looked like 2024. After that first series, he'd come back from the Green Bay injury and missing a couple of games, and he comes back, and that first series or two didn't necessarily look great, and then all of a sudden, he lit up the Chargers. 15 completions for 231 yards, a touchdown, no picks. Rushed for 39 yards on 8 carries, had that incredible play at the end of the half to McCaffrey. And they rolled a team that was pretty good on defense, the Chargers, 27-10. The Bears game, I thought he was fine in until the end. He had that one early misread pick, and then really got it going through 3 touchdown passes, threw for over 200 yards, rushed for over 5 yards a carry. And they're in position with a 24-22 lead to win the game. And the rain came, and it came harder, and can't use that as an excuse. He fumbled the football. He handed Chicago the game, or the opportunity to win the game. What still disgusts me about that game was, you didn't have to just let him move down the field after Jaden's turnover. If you recall, that last drive, they just lined it up and ran DeAndre Swift, literally into field goal range. Like, they were so horrendously soft with the game on the line, and Jake Moody made the kick for the Bears to beat him. The Dallas game was okay. The Seattle game was a disaster for everybody. There were receivers out there that nobody was familiar with. They were running the wrong routes. And truly, the Minnesota game, if you go back and really dissect it, as we did here, they only had the ball twice in the first half, 3 times total in the game, with him in the game before he got hurt, because defensively they couldn't get off the field. I mean, they made it was the only time that Minnesota fans all season long thought maybe J.J. McCarthy can be a starting quarterback in this league. In that game, it was his best game of his young career, and they had that incredible 98-yard drive on 19 plays that took over 12 minutes. Yeah. All right. I don't know why we just did that, but I don't know what I think the learning for Jaden Daniels from the first 2 years is really, it's like kind of, risk management. It is understanding when it makes sense to be a dog, when it makes sense to be super highly competitive, no holds barred. Like, we have to have this play or we're going to lose the game, versus plays in which, we're going to live to, run a second down and 10 play rather than a second down and 8 play with me taking a brutal shot trying to get 2 yards. That doesn't really make sense. Have you guys seen any of the LeBron to the Wizards discussion? I'll share some of it with you when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So ESPN.com just put out their post-NBA Combine mock draft. Number 1 overall, they do have the Wizards taking A.J. DeBonsa. What's written is the Wizards became the talk of the Combine after making good on their lottery odds, setting them up to pick number 1 for the first time since 2010. It's worth underscoring that there's still uncertainty around which direction Washington will go, but DeBonsa has become the presumptive favorite, with his size and projectable tools aligning with things the Wizards' decision makers have valued. DeBonsa measured in at 6 foot 8.5 barefoot at the Combine, with a +4 wingspan and a posted 42-inch vertical leap, helping quantify the elite physical piece of this projection. Rival teams don't view DeBonsa as a lock to go first, however, as there has been no true consensus number 1 among scouts all season. Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, and Caleb Wilson are all expected to receive consideration as the Wizards go through their process. The fact that there is a consensus group of 4 has led some executives to view the top of this draft as more ripe for trades than in a typical year, but only if the top 4 teams see value in moving around within that tier. Any trade dynamics will take time to play out, with the case typically being that the team with the top pick will simply wind up selecting the player it wants most. Brian Windhorst, who I think does a great job covering the league for ESPN and has for years, he actually had something to say the other day about the possibility of the Wizards dealing number 1. Here's what he said.
The next 40 days or so.
You know, the sentiment that I have heard is that Washington is sending out the message that they're willing to deal, but that if they do a deal, people think it will most likely not be with Utah. But of course, there's a long time between now and then.
I feel pretty confident the Wizards are going to pick somebody at number 1, and that's what's going. There were some, how do I want to say this? Feathers ruffled in Salt Lake City about perceived shenanigans with Ace Bailey in the pre-draft process last year. They thought maybe there was some shenanigans with the Wizards, who signed a two-way player named Sharif Cooper, who's Omar Cooper's son. Anyways, so I don't know if those guys are going out to lunch or anything.
By the way, in terms of the history of the number 1 pick being traded, if you remove Andrew Wiggins, who was traded in August as part of the Kevin Love thing, it wasn't traded on, in and around the draft.
Really count.
Well, it was traded. I just want to remove that.
No, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Since 1980, it's happened 4 times.
Okay. Weber.
Yes,
Does he come back to talking
Weber
about the Wizards or not?
Penny Hardaway.
Okay. You mentioned Tatum. What were the other
Max?
Well, Markelle Fultz for Tatum,
as you said.
And then the other one, 1980, Joe Barry Carroll was traded from the Pistons to the Warriors.
All right, go ahead and dump it. Yeah. We let that go on a little bit too long. You heard the beginning. That was Brian Windhorst talking about there is belief that the league, around the league, that the Wizards are open to discussing trading number 1. The Utah thing has been a discussion since the draft lottery. And part of it is just because A.J. DeBonsa has apparently a relationship with the Utah owner and knows the Jazz organization, having played in the state at BYU, and Washington having this, interest in Ace Bailey from a year ago. He had a really good rookie season for the Jazz. I'll tell you what, personally, if you were going to trade back down, I'd want Keontae George, the guard. The 3-year guard out of Baylor, who averaged 24 a game for Utah last year. But you could have Keyshawn and Keontae both on the team in terms of the Georges. But I don't think they're going to trade it. Here's the bottom line from my standpoint. If you have a clear-cut number 1, and that player is a player you believe has a chance to be that future, true all-NBA, MVP contending player in 5, 6, 7 years, you take that player. That's why you did this. This is why you lifted all those weights for these last 3 years, to put yourself into a position where you could pick the player in the draft that you thought had a chance to be an elite level superstar player. So if there's just one player that they feel that way about, you have to take that player. If it's Darren Peterson, you just have to make sure that the risk, that the reward is worth the risk. If you believe there's risk associated with the player, there's risk with every player that they're not going to turn out to be, all-time great. But everybody understands the Darren Peterson red flags. You cannot draft him if you think this guy doesn't love basketball, no matter what his talent is. But as far as they're concerned, they're in that position where if there's one player they believe in, you take the player. You can listen to everybody, but you're going to take that player. If there's more than one player that you believe has, that they have equal chances of becoming great, you consider a trade back. Why not? If you're, between two players and they're pretty equal, or if you don't think there is a player in this draft, you think this is an Anthony Bennett, 2013 draft where he went number one, or a Markelle Fultz draft in 2017 where he went number one, and you don't see a future, true superstar, then you consider trading back. Number one overall hasn't always worked out in the NBA. It has recently, at least it appears it has worked recently. Cooper Flagg last year. Now, Risa Shea was the number one pick the year Sarr went number 2 in 2024. That does not look like at this point that the Hawks got themselves a future superstar. But Wemby the year before that in 23, Banchero the year before that in 2022, Cade Cunningham in 2021, Anthony Edwards in 2020. I mean, we've had 6 straight years where 5 of the 6 number ones overall, one looks like he may become the greatest player of all time. One is truly, and 2 of them are truly elite level, all NBA first team MVP contenders in Cade Cunningham and Anthony Edwards. I think Paulo Banchero is perhaps a future first team all NBA, second team all NBA kind of a player. So not bad for the last 6 years. 5 out of the 6 really look like they're going to work out. But when you go back before the last 6 years, 2019 Zion, and Zion was can't miss. DeAndre Ayton the year before, Markelle Fultz in 17, Ben Simmons in 16, Karl Anthony Towns in 15. He's a really good player, not an MVP caliber player. Andrew Wiggins in 2014, Anthony Bennett in 2013. I mean, there was a stretch there of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of 7, basically nothing. And then you had Anthony Davis in 2012, Kyrie in 2011, John Wall in 2010. I mean, you can go back and play this game basically over the last 50 years. It's basically about a 48% hit rate on number one becoming truly great. So the odds are a little bit against them that they're going to land on somebody really great. That's why you got to be open-minded and you got to listen to offers, because those offers could create more swings, or you could potentially acquire, as Oklahoma City did, because they did not draft Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They traded for him. So the flexibility that the Wizards have created over the last 3 years not only includes more swings in the draft, but it includes having the firepower, having the ammo to be able to pull off, a trade for maybe a player that they believe could turn into a great player down the road, but just hasn't yet. Maybe they see Ace Bailey as that. I personally don't, but maybe they do. Maybe they like Ace Bailey more than DeBonsa or Peterson or Boozer. My guess, though, I think the odds-on favorite is the Wizards stick and pick on June 23rd. So, Bubba sent this to me. Bubba said, have you seen the stuff about LeBron James to the Wizards? I said, kind of, but not really. So he sent me a couple of things. Number one, I guess pardon my take, somebody on that show. I
Shout
think
him
it's
out.
the guy that's a DC sports fan.
Yeah, shout out PFT.
Who's that?
PFT commenter. He comes on
PFT
Beam and Finley every week or so. My brother actually also works on that show now. So shout out Jacob.
There you go. So he apparently said something about LeBron to the Wizards. Bubba sent that to me. Rich Paul, apparently LeBron's agent, hinted that the Wizards could be one of several teams that LeBron could actually be interested in. And then LeBron himself on his own podcast just expressed interest overall in kind of the Wizards' direction. Didn't say anything about being interested in playing for the Wizards, but obviously Anthony Davis, he won a title with Anthony Davis in the bubble in 2020 in Los Angeles. And by the way, they played beautifully together. I mean, they really did that year. LeBron is the free agent right now. It's, Trae Young would have been part of that equation, but Washington traded for him. There was a story Yahoo Sports wrote, LeBron James's free agency. This is from 3 days ago. Why Wizards, Rockets, and Mavericks are more realistic than you think. About the Wizards, the story goes, the Wizards have over $80 million in cap space and a young roster around Trae Young. Anthony Davis now anchors their defense after arriving via trade from Dallas. James could mentor rising talent while finishing his career in a fresh setting. Ownership would gain instant national attention and fresh market relevance in a major city. Yeah, LeBron's not coming here. I mean, LeBron's not coming here. I guess my question to all of you is, would you want LeBron here as a free agent in 2026, 2027? Look, he was really good this year. And he's not a number one necessarily on a championship contender. He's not maybe even a number two on a championship contender, although he certainly played at times like a number two on a championship contender. But the idea of Trae Young and LeBron James and Anthony Davis and, perhaps A.J. DeBonsa and then a host of other young players, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, Trey Johnson, Will Riley. Who am I forgetting? I mean, that would be certainly a story. That's for sure. The Wizards would be relevant immediately. I'll tell you what, they're going to be somewhat relevant just because of the number one pick. If they stick and pick somebody like DeBonsa or Peterson, they'll be certainly a story, especially if Anthony Davis plays and Trae Young plays, because they'll be a much better team. Again, I think the chances that LeBron James would come to Washington to close out his career are zero, less than zero. To me, what makes sense for LeBron, number one, is staying in L.A. Number two, Golden State. Number three, Cleveland. Number four, by the way, staying in L.A. and playing for the Clippers. That could be interesting. Washington, LeBron's not coming to D.C. But would you want him? 301-230-0980. 301-230-0980. I mean, I'll tell you what, after these past 3 years, just the idea that they'd be instantly relevant in the NBA in a major way. And by the way, that roster with Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Trae Young, and all the young players, including a number one pick, say, A.J. DeBonsa, they would certainly be favored to finish somewhere in the top 4 or 5 in the East, no worse than 6th, a solid playoff team, a team that's going to win 45 games or more. I don't think it would happen, but I don't know that I want it to happen, in part because I don't want the playing time for some of these players to be significantly reduced next year. And I don't need our team to be the farewell tour for LeBron. It never would be. Seriously. It's not because we're such a terrible NBA city destination, because the NBA team destination, franchise destination. Maybe that's on the verge of changing. We'll see. But it hasn't been, as we know. City's great. We all know that. A lot of players don't know that. They think the weather sucks. They think the taxes are too high. They think the organization is a mom and pop, operation, or it was for many years. But would you want it? It's not will it happen. The answer to will it happen is no. But would you want LeBron in Washington? 301-230-0980. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
How would you like to see maybe a Super Bowl in our nation's capital in a few years? I think the stadium may be done 2030, so we're looking at maybe 2032, 2033 maybe?
It'd probably be longer than that because we're almost out that far in Super Bowls. But listen, we talked about Washington having a Super Bowl going back 10 or 15 years, more than that, 25 years actually. I think it's something that someday we'll.
That was Commissioner Roger Goodell with Channel 7's Scott Abraham. They've been considering Washington for 25 years. I know Dan really pushed, and then they went with the first outdoor cold city to be the Meadowlands for the Seattle-Denver Super Bowl, and they promised after that they'd never do it again because if you recall, that 2013 season Super Bowl, they beat a 1-foot snowstorm by about 8 hours. So they're just not going to play it in a city that's cold and outdoors. But that's not what Washington will be. But he did say, probably not in 2031, 32. After that, Nashville got named the 2030 Super Bowl city yesterday. So, the simple math is their stadium opens in 2027. 3 years after that, they got a Super Bowl. If Washington's opens in 2030, maybe it's 2033 that you get a Super Bowl. I can't imagine a Super Bowl is not going to be played here once the new stadium is up and running. All right. There's been some conversation, limited conversation, I'll grant you that, about LeBron potentially considering Washington as an unrestricted free agent for his age 42, 43 season. I see 0% as the chance of it happening. And although it would be kind of exciting to see it, and I would love the Wizards to be that relevant for at least a season after so many years of being irrelevant, and I think that they could be really good. Obviously, it would come down to Anthony Davis and his health, but those two know how to play together, and I think they could actually win a lot of games next year. But I'm not crazy about the idea. I mean, you're going to take minutes away from some of these young developing players. And even though they sort of changed the timeline when Anthony Davis became available and they're going to really try to go win this year, you got 3 spots and 3 to 4 spots off the bench for the development of all of their young players in meaningful games. But yeah, it's not that I wouldn't on some level be thrilled for, professionally thrilled if LeBron came to DC. That would be a good thing for sure. Max, would you want to see LeBron in a Wizards uniform next year?
As a kid, I was not a big LeBron fan, but my respect for him has grown over time, kind of like Alex Ovechkin in a much different way. But I say that to say I respect longevity as it grows and watching him do all this. But being a farewell tour for the Wizards right now is just not something that I think that they want to have as a distraction. I think they want to just have these young guys develop and get better. Now, I understand that AD and Trey are here, but I really, really do not think that LeBron would ever really consider coming East Coast to Washington.
Yeah. Paulie, what's up? Hail to the W.
Hail to the W, big guy. How you doing?
What's up?
I said yesterday on Doc's show, I kind of agree with you. Like, man, why would you do that and kind of stunt the growth of some of these players? But if you think about the positives of it, man, it might motivate Anthony Davis to want to stay. As you just said, they play well together. So you talking about him, Trey Young, and Davis. I mean, that's a formidable starting lineup. The Wizards haven't been trying to win, so why not bring LeBron in? Because they're trying to win. We always talk about his whole career. He makes the right basketball play. So who better to learn how to win from than LeBron James?
Yeah.
And excuse me. And also, he'll take a lot of that pressure off of whoever is going to be the number 1 pick. So if they do take DeBonta, it won't be a DeBonta highlight reel or DeBonta criticism reel, on ESPN every night. It'll be starting out with LeBron and then young DeBonta. So it might be.
Here's the part. Here's the part of it. First of all, I don't know that there's going to be that much pressure. I don't know that there's going to be that much pressure. Hold on, Paulie. Hold on. I don't know that there's going to be that much pressure on DeBonsa to begin with in his rookie year anyway. But you know what I just thought of, and you'll either shoot it down or agree with it. I just thought about how I hated the Bruce Smith farewell tour. I hated the Bruce Smith, chase for the sack record, because we got him at 36, 37 years old, whatever he was. And he did actually have a good season or two here in Washington during those years. But I just always felt like it was all about him and not the team and the team's results. And LeBron's not that way. LeBron's not going to come back and play and not try to win. This is why he's not coming here, because he wants to legitimately contend for a title, I would imagine, in his final year. But I just wouldn't want to be a part of the farewell tour madness that would surround it. And I've always felt that way about Bruce Smith here in Washington.
I hear what you're saying, but I kind of disagree with that, because Bruce was definitely just playing for a record. Like you said, LeBron is trying to
play well, remember, too, though.
No, he did, but
yeah.
He got forced into playing. He shouldn't have played as much as he played, number one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But what I'm saying about LeBron is not just – he's not going to catch a ring out west. So I do think he's coming east. I don't care what nobody says. You look at the playing teams with Charlotte, Orlando, Miami,
Cleveland could be the spot. He could go back to Cleveland and do it again.
Well, I think that depends on what Cleveland does here in this series.
Yeah.
If they kind of tank out, or if the Knicks run them out the gym, then yeah. But if it's like a 7-game type series and all the games is close, whatever, I don't see Cleveland trying to mess that chemistry they got up. Because best believe whoever gets LeBron, the chemistry of the team is going to change. And that's what I'm saying about the Wizards. There is no chemistry on that team. So you kind of could develop a chemistry with LeBron and showing these young guys how to play. I mean, the fact that what he did in the Houston series without Luka, it was a form of, I think.
No, he played great.
He showed you the IQ of LeBron.
No doubt. I got to run. Hard break. Got to get out. Thanks, Paulie. Thanks to all of you that called earlier about Wemby. Mark and Largo and the others that I didn't get to here. We'll try it again maybe tomorrow. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.